Hi, it's great to be with you today in this lovely setting. As I was getting ready to come here today, like many of you, I wanted to be sure I looked just right. So in that moment, as I was getting dressed, I turned to my husband and said, "So, how do I look?" And as you can imagine, that can be a conversation fraught with danger for him, because in that moment I realized it's not only what you say, but how you say it. This is true too for people living with Alzheimer's disease. What we know about people living with this disease is that they are very in tune to the tone of the conversation, much less so to the words, but more to the tone of the conversation. And in fact, depending on what you say and the tone of which you say it, it can really act as a lightning rod, if you will, to bring about some distressing symptoms and some distressing behaviors on their part. So oftentimes in reaction to words that are said to them, or the tone of the words that are said to them, or that they understand, they then exhibit distressing symptoms such as repetitive speaking. They become very maybe annoyed, anxious, and aggressive at times. So this is an area that we wanted to take a look at in our ways to support family caregivers. So a recent research study that my colleagues and I undertook really dealt with the notion of listening in. Could we listen to conversations between family caregivers and their loved one, if you will, who's living with Alzheimer's disease? Could we listen to the tone of the conversation, run it through machine learning algorithms that we'd been able to develop in real time, and identify some of the mood states that were happening? So for example, could we run algorithms that could help us in real time identify when the environment, when the tone of the conversations was going in an unpleasant direction? So for example, if I were to say to you, you're untrustworthy, I can say that in a couple ways, or go away. Something like go away, you hear the difference in my tone there, people could react to that very differently than if I said, please go away and we'll talk about this later, versus go away. So it really is these kinds of tone differences that through computer-generated machine learning and algorithms that we developed, that we can identify happy, sad, frustrated, different mood states that we can then give back to the family caregiver in real time to help them maybe readjust the words that they're doing, the words that they're saying, and the way that they're interacting with their loved one. In my own world, I know that when I change words, that they really do change the tone of a conversation. What I've learned was that when I go from using the word but to using the word and, it really does change how a conversation's going. So think about that for a moment. If I were to say to you, today's a beautiful day, but we have to go to work, versus today's a beautiful day and I get to go to work, you see how the tone is different, and really not so much the tone, but the context of that changes. People tend to listen only to what comes after the but, with the consequence, versus an and how that opens a conversation. So I just share that with you in your own lives. Think about replacing the word but with the word and you really can change the narrative, if you will. Back to the research study, when we pick up the conversations, if you will, using a microphone, and we're not as interested in the words as we are the tone of the words for the algorithms. When we pick up on these, and we were able to connect via a smartphone with the caregiver in real time and say, hey, seems like you're getting more frustrated. Might this be a time to intervene, to do something differently? And some of the ways that we're trying to intervene were through some mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques. One of these you probably know about and is actually incredibly effective. This notion of pausing, breathing, and then resuming. So really just taking a step away to take some deep breaths, and what we know is that physiologically that activates your parasympathetic nervous system to bring down your heart rate and to help calm. So let's try this here together. So kind of sit up straight, if you will. Take in a deep breath. Hold it for about 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, and release fully. So for our caregivers, we asked them to do this several times, and what we're finding out from them is that it really did work. It helped for them to be less stress reactive in the moment, and they believed from their survey data that they had a better relationship with their loved one as a result of this. So the work we're doing, I know, is just one piece of the puzzle. That what we've learned from this research is that people wanted to implement these not so much in real time. So for example, when we were buzzing them through the smartphone, in the middle of maybe a heated conversation, that was not the right time for them to take action or to be present, fully present, to be able to enact the recommendation. And what I know is that it did move us further along in terms of understanding the stress reactivity process that caregivers have. In the end, what we're trying to do is really understand and help support family caregivers so that they can stay in their home environments longer with their loved one. So I know this is one piece, if you will, of the puzzle, but there are so many more pieces of the puzzle that we still need to address. Thank you again.